Everybody.
Hello, people of Earth.
Hello.
How are you?
We speak to you from our den of pestilence.
We really do.
We are not well.
We've been better. But we're rallying. My God, we haven't even mentioned it.
I know. We're so long suffering, right?
We're so stoic.
No one would ever know we were feeling right. Hi, Marianne.
Hey, Marianne.
Hi, Anne Karen. Oh, from Norway. That's where our beloved Karen
is.
She's
in
Oslo, Norway, this very moment.
Aww,
Donna's
nice.
here, and Cindy from Dallas, and Lucy and Carrie. Oh, hi, Carrie and Cindy. Did I say Cindy? Could be a different Cindy. Who knows? Aletta. We haven't seen her, or Lucy, or Carrie. All the peoples is coming. All the ladies and maybe a gentleman or two.
Yes. Phil commented on the Facebook post.
Phil and Nick. Yeah, we had Phil and Nick here last week, and we were pleased. Deeply gratified.
Hello, all my friends.
Yeah, hi, the friends.
Aw, so nice.
So good to see you. There's Jerry and Amy and Kathy and Kathleen and Lisa from Estonia. Estonia.
Represent Estonia.
Booyah.
Shannon Beck says, what a week.
Stephen. Woo! Shannon, Donna, Meg. Oh, Laura. Christine.
We have
Lindsay.
so many hellos, so many wonderfuls, lots of peoples.
Lots of people.
You want to just get right into self-sabotage?
Yeah, I do. I want to do
keen to hear about self-sabotage.
This is fun.
As am I.
This is because I've been writing my book, and I keep creating exercises to test to see if I can help people with this book. And so I thought of one today, and I've been testing it on people, and I think it works. So I wanted to tell you about it, since the book won't be out for like a year. So it's about how to stop self-sabotaging. And by that I mean repeating behaviors that we say we don't want to repeat. Like, for example, driving past your ex's house every single night, even after the restraining order is sent out. Like smoking, like drinking too much alcohol, like drinking too much milkshake. Like, I don't want to focus on the food things. Everybody focuses on the food things they shouldn't eat. It's a little bit, it's like the sin of our times. But there's so many other things we do. We lose our tempers. We procrastinate. It has that one. You never write your novel because every time you sit down, you get into an approach avoidance thing. Did I tell you this last time? That rats and mice, if you put them in a situation where they don't know what to do, they may get an electric shock, or they may get a bit of food, and they really want to go get the bit of food, but because of the electric shock, they just sit down and start grooming themselves. That's what I do when I'm trying to get anything to happen. I move toward it, and then just before I start, I have to do some sort of self-grooming behavior. I have to bleach my teeth now, whatever. So that's the self-sabotaging behavior that I do, procrastination. You can think of yours, whatever it is. It could be robbing banks, it could be huge, or it could be tiny. For the purposes of this exercise, I want to tell you about one of mine, which is I am not supposed to eat any dairy at all. And when I said to my doctor, but perhaps if I just eat things that don't have many milk solids in them, like, I don't know, butter, maybe it would be okay. And she did wave in my face my test results and say, do you want to see what happens to your immune system every time you have any dairy at all? So I'm not meant to have dairy, but every now and then I eat something with butter in it, or I put cream in my tea or coffee. And every time I think I shouldn't, I mustn't, and then I do. Okay, so think of your particular self-sabotage. It could be like, you might get into relationships that are with people you don't really like, and then have ugly breakups with them. Or, I'm not just talking about tiny things like drinking cream in your coffee, but it's the same process no matter what. And the process is called walking back the cat. Now, if you are a fan of spy books and movies and so on, you know that walking back the cat is what spies supposedly do when something goes terribly wrong and there's a big disaster and it's quite complex. And it could be something like the Bay of Pigs. It could be huge, or it could be somebody's mission went awry. Whatever it is, they try to figure out what happened by creating a causal chain that goes from the present to the past. So they're walking backwards. And by walking back the cat, I think they chose walk back the cat because cats are hard to track. They're like the most soft-footed and spooky of all the animals. And so to walk back a cat is a very subtle thing. And you have to go, okay, so when the bad thing happened, okay, so last night I had a cup of chai and I put cream in it, just a little, but I put the cream in. That's where you start, okay? So think of your self-sabotaging behavior. Go to it. And then think, right before I did the thing, put cream in my coffee, what was happening? What was I doing? What was I feeling? And what was I thinking? So right before I had the chai, we had just watched TV. We were going to go to bed. And I was coughing because I was feeling sick. And I remember going to the fridge, coughing and coughing, putting some cream in. What was I feeling? I was feeling something should make me feel better. I don't feel good, and something should make me feel better. So what was I doing right before that? I was sitting with my son watching TV. We have this nightly ritual of watching TV together. And so that's what we were doing. What was I thinking? What was I feeling? I was feeling tired. I wasn't feeling as sick yet, but I was feeling tired. And I was thinking I should get some work done tonight. Boom. As soon as I remember that, it's like that was the moment when I went from a slightly unwell, tired person on a couch who doesn't want to break any rules to a person who was pushing past an internal limit. And the most important part of this is, and this is the key, I was lying to myself and believing the lie. Now, the whole premise of my life these days is that the one thing that gets us in trouble is veering away from our truth. And the one way back to happiness is going completely into our truth. Like you guys have heard about my integrity cleanse. Like it has to be incredibly, immaculately aligned with what we deeply feel to be the truth. So when I remember sitting on the couch and thinking, I should get some work done tonight. That's a belief that's really deep in my field of assumptions. I was always somebody who like did a lot of homework at night and stuff. I was a total nerd. But when I started having children, I remember I'd put them to bed at 8, and then I think I better get some work done. I was in graduate school. I was trying to write a dissertation. And so it was like the moment they were asleep, I had to take that time and work and work and work. And it became a habit so that even after they were older, when they weren't babies, and I didn't have to get up with them at night, or even as they got to be teenagers and I didn't have to get them dressed or, sent to school or anything, still, the moment I was alone, I would go and work. And the moment I wasn't working, I would try to do something that would be useful as a wife and mother, and then as a partner and mother. But, and then as a wife and mother, it all gets very confusing in here. That's a whole different episode. My point is, I have a set of assumptions that includes the thought I should be getting something done. I should be getting, and by something I mean writing. It's something that leads toward money making, work, what we call work. And that's very deep in my field of assumptions. What made me put the cream in my coffee was not the stress of overworking. It was believing a lie, the stress of believing a lie. So this might seem a little odd to you. It's like, okay, so I walk back to cat. Let me describe another one. This is when I used to go to a methadone clinic in Phoenix, and we'd talk to the heroin addicts who'd come in. to get their methadone because they couldn't score heroin that day. So these were not people who were trying to get clean and sober generally. They were just hardcore heroin addicts. But they were there to get methadone, which is a little bit like heroin, but not as good, so they say. But in order to get their methadone, they had to go through a class of some kind. And then sometimes that class was me. So I would ask them, what happened? You were sitting in your apartment and you'd gone to your 12-step group. You were trying to get clean. So this, for example, take this guy who was trying to get clean. What happened between guy sitting on the couch, watching TV, not worried about going out and scoring drugs, and guy who was suddenly obsessed with going out and scoring drugs? And so we walked back the cat. I mean, he remembered taking the drugs, then buying the drugs, then backward to leaving his apartment, then backwards to being on the couch. It all starts on the couch, I think the moral is, but it really did. And I said, so what were you doing? What were you feeling? What were you thinking? He said, I wasn't doing anything. I was just sitting there. What were you feeling? Nothing. What were you thinking? Nothing. I said, no, you have to be feeling something. He said, well, okay, I was bored. I said, all right, why were you bored? He said, I don't know, there's like nothing to do. And I'm like, no, go into the boredom. So if you walk back the cat and you get stuck, you want to stay in the scenario that you remember, and you want to go deeper, 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 deeper in. Now, here's a good trick. I said to him, if you hadn't gotten up to get the drugs and you had just stayed on the couch without moving, what would you have felt then? And he said, I would have been unbearably bored. That is more boredom than a person could stand. And I was like, this doesn't sound like boredom anymore. This sounds like anxiety to me. And he's like, okay, so all right, if I hadn't got the drugs, I would have been anxious. I said, all right, the anxiety had to be based on something. You're sitting on the couch 1 minute, no anxiety. You were sitting on the couch the next minute, anxiety. What? Nothing moved. What happened in your head? And he finally identified it, and it was, I have really messed up my life. Like, I've ruined my life with all this drugging. That was the thought. And from then on, boom, he experienced the beginnings. And I noticed a lot of heroin addicts would tell me this, that the emotion they felt was boredom, but if you scratch the surface of the boredom, it was always like terror, panic. There was a lot of fear, and it just came out as this scratchy kind of. But if you sit with it, if you walk back the cat far enough, you can find the original idea, the original feeling. And the original feeling is based on a thought. And the thought hurts. And the reason the thought hurts is that it's not true. So you might say, in these two cases, my thought, I should really get something done. And his thought, I've ruined my life. Well, those are true, right? They look really true from the perspective of culture. My premise is that if you're sabotaging yourself, there's something in your mind that is stressful to you because it does not resonate with your spirit's version of truth, capital T. And your spirit's version of truth affects your body very strongly, so that your body feels relaxed when it hears a truth, and it feels tensed when it hears something that to it is a lie. And from there, your emotions go. And you start to get negative emotions, either sadness, fear, or greed, sadness, fear, or anger, or some variation of those three, based on the thought that isn't true. Now, the mind, we talk about the spirit, which knows the truth, the body, which knows the truth, the emotions, which follow the truth. The mind is often way late to the party. The mind is the one telling the lies. And the only way we can know if something's harmonious with our sense of truth is whether or not it causes suffering. This is why when we do, for example, Byron Katie, the spiritual teacher Byron Katie, does her work to help eliminate suffering, she always goes to a thought that hurts. And a thought that hurts, when you question it, turns out not to be true. And the truth, which is usually the opposite of that painful thought, is exactly what you need to set you free. It is the key. So in my case, I should get something done tonight. If I walk back to that couch moment and I say, I should get something done. And then I say, wait. Is that really true? Am I absolutely sure? I really probably shouldn't get something. I don't need to get something done. And in fact, I'm actually getting a cold. It might be better if I just took care of myself tonight. If I start thinking that way, even in my memory, I can feel the compulsion to self-sabotage going away. Because the self-sabotage is just another symptom of doing something that's wrong for me. So with my heroin addict friend, when we walked back the cat, and I said, we're going to question this idea that you've ruined your life. Have you really, are you absolutely certain? Can you be absolutely certain that there's no way your life can be salvaged? Have you really ruined it? And when he sat with it long enough, and this is what you have to do with things you truly believe, even if they're painful. When he sat with it for long enough, despite wanting to get up and get more drugs, he's finally got to, nope. He said, I've seen guys worse than me get better. I've seen lives worse than mine get better. I can, I'm not a complete loss as a person. And at that point, you could see the relaxation in his body. You could see the lift in his mood. And I promise you, those things, when he was in that state, he was less likely to need heavy-duty pain medication, because the pain he was medicating was the pain of thinking these horrible things about himself. So that's the rule of how to stop sabotaging. You go to the last time it happened. You start with the time when you actually did the thing. And then you walk back the cat going, what was I thinking? What was I doing? What was I feeling? Right before that. Okay, then right before that. Then right before that, until you get to the moment when you went from being a pretty happy camper to a person who was driven to self-sabotage. And at that moment, there will be a thought that is a lie. Question that thought, turn it around, get the opposite, and you will find your way to freedom. And you will stop self-sabotaging, but you will also move toward enlightenment, because that's what your whole system is geared to do. So, Gracious Badger, come in your sickly state.
Here I am, sickly but present.
We're all sickly but present. So,
we
Badger.
Already have some brilliant questions. I'm so excited about them. You just keep making those delicious noises.
we have been like we have created such a symphony of illness.
Now, this is great. You actually did answer this just after she asked it, but I would love you to say it again, because it's not the easiest exercise in the world. So Judith wanted to know which questions help you walk back the cat.
Okay. You go to the moment that it happened. What was happening around me? What was I doing? What was I feeling? And what was I thinking? And the hardest one will be, what was I thinking? But if you go to what was around you and then narrow it down to what you were doing, that'll help you get into the memory state of what you were feeling. And what you were feeling, if you allow it to be big enough, the feeling will start to give you a thought. It's always based on a thought. And the thought is what you want to work with. But that's how you have to get to the right thought. A lot of our coaches spend all their time trying to get to the right thoughts.
And it's tricky, and it's something you do have to tease out. It takes a little bit of time, but it's really
I remember I used to, many years ago, I was a massive binge eater, and this was just like hell on wheels for me. I could not stop it. I'd go into these, what I call an addictive trance, and I would just be like out of control. And from then on, it was going to be a binge, and I couldn't stop it. And then I'd hate myself afterwards. Well, I started doing this way back then, and I would say, okay, what happened right before I started eating? And it was really hard at first to remember, but then I started to remember more and more. What was happening around me? What was I doing? What was I feeling? What was I thinking? And I started to realize it was always when I had thoughts like, I am completely alone in the universe. I felt like there is no love or warmth in this entire universe. I had these very deep, fatalistic, lonely thoughts. And it was only when I went to therapy and started questioning those thoughts that the compulsion started to loosen. And then one day I remember going to the fridge, opening it and going, okay, a second ago I thought that there was no light or warmth in the universe. That's not the same as hungry. And I just shut the fridge and walked away. And I still had to deal with finding out how the universe was bearable. But I stopped the compulsion that day, and it never really came back. But it took a long time of jumping on it and trying to walk back the cat right after the event. And it's a subtle skill, but it's very powerful. So it's worth the time and effort.
Absolutely agree. So Donna has an interesting question. She says, how do you find the belief that is a lie when the belief causes a positive result, or you may have disconnected from the pain it causes? For example, I self-sabotage my writing by checking work email, which results in success at work. My belief is that work comes before my own purpose, but work pays the bills and gives accolades to my affirmation, that gives the accolades my affirmation addicted self needs.
Yep. Yes, indeed. This is the whole thing. The reason most of us self-sabotage is that we believe things that are wrong for us, but right according to our culture or our society. So we come from a very puritanical society. It's very hardworking. It's very obsessed with finance, and it's very judgmental. So when you run into a belief that's driving bad behavior, but the belief seems to be good, like I should work harder, I should get my book done, for example. Wait a second, she's going to it and thinking I should get my emails done. So if the thought I should get emails done is causing you to sabotage something you dearly want, which is your book, you have to examine ways in which it might not be true. The first thing you do is you say, I should get work emails done, really hold the belief and feel what it does to your body. So if you're really meant to get some, it's so interesting because I get so many emails, not that many are really pressing in the moment. When I see those, I have a strong urge to answer them, and I shock everyone around me by answering them.
Yes.
The vast majority of the time, I'm like, meh, I'll get to it later. But it's so interesting. Some of them I want to answer, and by far most, I do not. So if you go to, I'm sitting down to write my novel, but oh goodness, I need to do my work emails. That thought, if it's not true, will resonate in the body as tension. And you'll think, oh, okay, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do my work emails, and I'm never going to write that novel, but this is good because my culture says it is. Now you're in an interesting place. You have found something that's not true for you as an individual that is strongly reinforced by the culture. And I believe this is the reason most of us go on track. We're good people, we're trying our hardest, but we buy into a culture that is wrong for us. So just the other day I was talking to someone, we were in New York having dinner with someone who talked about being a very successful executive in a certain profession, and then realizing, I'm not happy here, I'm really not happy here. Quitting, going into a totally different profession that seemed much more creative and making a ton more money. And I just wanted to take her home and put her up as Exhibit A, because I've seen this over and over, but the culture doesn't believe it's true. That if you hate what you're doing and it's wrong for you, and you just keep doing it, that's the only way to survive and make money and be a good person. That's
money
the cultural
is the
belief.
prize for unhappiness.
Yes.
It's the consolation prize for being
Well
unhappy
said.
at work.
Well said, Badger.
Thank you.
But, and so very few of us ever risk writing the novel instead of doing the emails. But if there's pain in the body, if there's clenching in the heart, and if the soul's not on board when you say, I'm going to do my emails instead of my novel, if you yearn to write the novel, but you never get around to it, your culture's wrong. And you have to dare to disbelieve. And if nobody ever dared to disbelieve culture, we'd still have slavery. No one would have dared to say, this just feels wrong. I don't care if it's legal, it feels wrong. Women couldn't have the vote, because no women would have said, wait, I know the culture says I can't. It feels wrong. And men were going, yeah, that feels wrong. So people have to push culture forward by finding places where it's telling them to do things that aren't true for them.
And culture always is another thought. Like Donna, that even the accolade addiction is still thoughts. And I think what Martha's saying is like, you come back to your body, you come back to your body.
Come back to your body, come back to your heart. Do what an animal would do, if an animal could write a novel. Oh, now we're really in the weeds in so many ways this week.
Both our dogs are writing novels, and it's a disaster.
That's right. Yeah, our golden retriever's novel is no, you don't want to even go there. So yeah, that's the key. Is, I talk a lot about how I've always believed in the dawning of a new consciousness, and how the way we are in the world, we've taken over the whole planet with this very rationalist, materialist view of things. But the fact is, we're ruining everything. We're ruining the ecosystems on which we depend. And if we're going to fix everything, we're going to have to push forward past the thoughts that our culture tells us are so productive, because they're also destructive. And where do we go for wisdom? We really can't go to the ancient past, because there are more of us here than there ever were on the planet before. And we can't just kill off the population and start from zero again. We have to find a really new way. And the really new way comes from new thoughts that go beyond anything the culture's thought before. And those new thoughts come from the heart. And how do we find them in our hearts? We look for the places where our lives aren't working. And we walk back the cat until we find something that is driving us away from our deep happiness, from our sense of purpose, from our truth. And when we pop in there and find the lies and change them and start behaving differently, I've seen it so many times, I've experienced it myself. The rewards come to keep you alive and thriving. And also, you start doing things you never would have dreamed you could. And your life becomes happier. Your life becomes more true.
I have a good question coming off of that, if you're...
Please.
Trisha asks, if when you walk back the cat and find trauma, how do you tease apart when the thought is the cause versus trauma held by the body? Or is it always about the thought?
They're always linked, because the trauma held by the body is, this is unbearable. I thought I had this one dead to rights. I once had to have a minor surgery without anesthesia. I mean, they gave me a local, and then they shoved a pair of scissors into a very sensitive area of my body and started cutting without anesthesia. And let me tell you, there, on TV when they show people getting, like, cowboys having surgery with anesthesia and they don't scream. No, no, you scream. It is unfathomably painful. And when I went to the Byron Katie School, one of the thoughts I worked is my body is vulnerable to pain. And she was like, nope, it's all your thoughts. And I was like, I thought words I shouldn't say on the air. And then she's like, meditate on it. So I sat there, and the first thing I thought was, I wish they'd been able to put me under general anesthesia, because then I wouldn't have felt anything. And then I thought, wait a second, my body would have been there, but I would not have been conscious. So actually my body wasn't what was feeling the pain. It was consciousness that was feeling the pain. And then the second thing, as I sat there and I went into a full trauma reaction, sweating, shaking, the person helping me was like, there were people coming over, and they're told not to interfere with your process, but people were freaking out because I was in a full-on trauma. And right in the middle of it, I realized that the absolute most terrible thing about that experience was he's going to do it again. He's going to cut me again. It was never what was happening in the moment. It was always what was about to happen. And it was like a millisecond. But as soon as I realized that, sorry guys, it was, and I don't even expect you to believe this, but it was so liberating. Suddenly it was like, whoa. I thought, I'm going to be okay, because as long as I stay incredibly present, and as long as I'm just with experience and not with, oh my God, it's going to come again, which is only a thought, what I'm experiencing now, I can just scream and get it over with. Done. The trauma reaction came from the anticipation and then the memory. And I'm not saying it's easy. I am not saying that this is easy. I'm saying you can meditate on it for hours before you get to the place where it's like, in that moment, I'm okay. In that exact moment, I'm okay. And I've watched people at the Byron Katie School get to that moment with their house being bombed and falling down on their heads and killing people, their families. I've watched it happen to people who were threatened with murder by their own parents. I mean, geez, I didn't mean to get into all this deep stuff right at the end of the gathering room. But what I've found, and I've really looked at it, is that once you have the absolute truth, once you have the truth in the mind, in the heart, in the body, something arrives that brings an absolute peace, even in the face of that kind of pain, even in the face of what would be so horrifying to any normal person. Absolute presence brings the perspective of the spirit, and it goes to the whole universe. And time doesn't exist anymore, and space doesn't exist anymore. And you're going, oh, this is a fleeting, transient moment when something appears to be going on so that I can have this experience as a spiritual being. Oh, this is kind of amazing. And at that point, you can stop self-sabotaging with things like being afraid of pain and death. I have not reached this point yet, but I have gotten over a lot of self-sabotaging behaviors by walking back the cat from the place where I started to the place where I lied and learning to see through the lie. And in the process, I've gone wildly away from what my society would consider normal, and I'm loving it. So, yeah, that's kind of intense. But we hope that you got something out of it.
This is a big one, this walking back the cat thing. It's like I struggled to get there, but when I did, the payoff was so great. And so we might even come back to it and do it again sometime, or work on it.
It takes an incredible amount of attention to the inner working. And everything in you is forcing you to try to get away from those feelings by doing the self-sabotage. And when you stop, you end up looking at the hardest feelings and the hardest things to disbelieve. So it's delicate, it's intricate. Nobody said it was easy.
It's very rewarding.
And it will, I think it'll take you all the way to enlightened and
beyond.
And beyond, who knows?
All right,
we love you. Where I'm going to go collapse onto the bed. And I hope that you all, wherever you are, go collapse somewhere, and we can all be together in complete indolence, which I've decided is my new supreme state.
If it feels like truth.
Thanks, you guys.
We love you.
See you next week. Be less croaky then. Bye.